rejoin the organization of the town of White Bluff, regarding the renewable energy system installation. Ms. Amanda.
Thank you. Yes, so this is, as the chair stated, this is one of these cleanup items that I have been kind of looking at and wanting to approach for some time, and now is the time. The purpose of this is to make a distinction in your zoning ordinance between your regular, like, residential solar panels and renewable energy for your residential uses versus your larger scale renewable energy facility. Okay, the most common in Tennessee are what are generally referred to as solar ranches. Okay, in other parts of the nation, along the plains or whatnot, you might have wind turbines. You might have, along the rivers, you've got hydroelectricity facilities. So really it just kind of depends on whatever natural feature is in here. But in Tennessee, the emphasis has really been on solar energy. And we're at a point now where technology has evolved to the point where it's not just residential use only anymore. Okay.
Isn't IP use a lot of that?
IT?
And the packaging?
Oh.
They do. Yes. Their roof is covered in solar.
That's what I thought.
Right. So what this does, and that's a great point, so what this does is it tries to, what this ordinance amendment does, is it tries to make a distinction between the smaller scale uses like what IT does in a commercial or industrial use where it's on a rooftop or whatnot, versus where it is a standalone independent use. Okay. So does that make sense to everybody? Is everybody tracking with me? Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to look at are the First Amendments, which would be the addition of definitions. So the first proposed definition would be a definition of renewable energy system facility, which would be any facility or installation such as a windmill, hydroelectric unit, or solar collecting or concentrating array designed and introduced to produce energy from natural forces such as wind, water, sunlight, or geothermal heat, or from biomass for off-site use. For off-site use. That's a key term, for off-site use. Okay. Non-industrial renewable energy system. A device or combination of devices or elements that uses direct sunlight as an energy source for purposes such as heating or cooling a structure, heating or pumping water, or generating electricity for generally commercial or domestic on-site use. Examples include, but are not limited to, a solar greenhouse, solar panels, or a solar water heater. So the main distinction between a renewable energy system facilities and non-industrial renewable energy system is that one is designed for off-site uses, meaning it is an energy producer that is used to then store the electricity and transmit it somewhere off-site. And the other generates the electricity where it's designed to be used on the site where it's actually generated. So like a geothermal system for a house, for example, or even a company, if you wanted to install geothermal cooling or heating or whatnot. Does that make sense? Okay. One thing I should have stated earlier is I could have, and other communities have, just called regulations like this solar regulations. I didn't want to go that route for White Bluff because I think that technology is advancing fast enough that it would be appropriate to term something like this just renewable energy, because we don't know how soon in our future we may be able to be utilizing geothermal or hydroelectric or anything like that in such ways. So I tried to write this in a more broad enough where it could capture potential other technologies coming through, but specific enough to address things that are happening right now also. Okay, all right, so what the second part of this ordinance amendment does is it actually enhances what you already have on the books, which is a good thing. In your current zoning ordinance in 5.063.3 is your I-3 special impact district. And how this works is that you already have provisions, as I said, in your zoning ordinance that allows for the establishment of uses that would qualify as a special impact. Sorry, I left my mouse at home, so I'm using the touchpad and it's tricky. That would qualify as a special impact facility. And that is listed under uses permitted, which is part D, as in dog, as electricity generating facilities and transmission lines. So that's already considered a use permitted in your I-3 special impact district. There are no uses permitted as special exceptions in an I-3. What's interesting about I-3 is that even though there are no special exceptions, your uses permitted by right have a set of criteria that go with them, kind of like what you would see in other special exceptions, except that because they are considered specific uses, that there are certain criteria that have to be met that are above and beyond your typical site plan requirements. So, for example, where in I-3, incinerators and atomic reactors are allowed in I-3 zone, there is, under Part I, requirements for specific uses, requirements for incinerators and atomic reactors. And it goes through A through F on the specific requirements, and so on and so forth. And so what this amendment does is it puts into place requirements, site requirements for renewable energy system facilities. So just as a quick reminder, these are the ones that are intended for energy or energy consumption for off-site energy production. So what is being produced, or what is being proposed, are the following criteria. Minimum lot size would be 5 acres. Minimum setback shall be 50 feet on the front and 25 feet on the sides and rear of the property. To the satisfaction of the Board of Zoning Appeals, the applicant shall present a decommissioning plan demonstrating methodology by which renewable energy facility will be taken offline and how property will be rehabilitated to allow for use by other owners. To the satisfaction of the Board of Zoning Appeals, actually it shouldn't say Board of Zoning Appeals, I'm sorry, it should say to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. I apologize, that's a typo. In both places? Yes, I'm sorry, I will correct that. To the satisfaction of the Planning Commission, the applicant shall demonstrate the potential environmental impacts of the renewable energy facility and their plans to mitigate any such impact. The applicant shall, the applicant shall include any federal or state permits associated with the construction, maintenance, or running of any renewable energy facility. An emergency response plan demonstrating how emergencies are to be handled internally at the facility and how the general public safety within 500 yards of the facility will be maintained. Sorry, I'm getting myself really confused. Have I commingled? I'm sorry, give me 1 second to check my process here. Okay, does not say. I'm sorry, y'all, give me 1 second. I think I may have commingled a section with another section.
Feel free to just review the process because that will vote today. I mean,
Okay, I'll take a look at that process. For some reason, the way that I have it written is that it would go to BZA, but it would not go to BZA because it's a use permitted by
Yeah,
right, but it would have to go through a rezoning process because there are no I-3, so it would have to be rezoned to, yeah, so it would have, that's where I was getting my sections commingled. So in White Bluff, there are no properties that are zoned I-3. So an applicant, any applicant that's wanting to come in and establish a use that is only allowed under I-3 would have to petition the planning commission and the town council to be rezoned to I-3. So,
Is this only for off-site, right? This whole.
no, for anything in general, for
Oh,
anything
Okay,
in general for an I-3 use.
but I mean, I'm kind of understanding that we're talking about off-site use, not on-site.
No, forget about that. That's just renewable energy specific. I'm talking broader now. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I probably completely confused everybody in the room. I'm sorry.
And just to clarify, the way I understood it was for off-site, you mean, like, if a building wants solar panels on the roof, it's not gonna fall under the, renewable energy system facility.
Correct.
If they wanna generate energy on this parcel to sell or use off of that parcel, that's what's triggering. You become
Yes.
a energy plant.
Yes.
Whether it's you're only producing 100 watts or, hundreds of kilowatts, it doesn't matter.
Yes. And that, it was the second part after I got through my criteria. But then I got caught up on the process and realized that I made an error in commingling two
Well,
sections.
and some jurisdictions do the BZA process, and that's something I think this body should weigh in on. Right now, in your zoning ordinance, you do not allow special exceptions in the I-3 district, meaning, for better or worse, the BZA is not involved. That's why in your zoning ordinance, the I-3 specifications are way more lengthy than the other zoning districts, because think of it as the special exception conditions are already in here. You're already picking what they're going to be. So I don't think you need to have it go to the BZA. I think it would just be, a lot of these are satisfying the planning commission when a site plan comes in.
Right.
Right? I mean, we're contemplating a site plan.
Right. Most communities are structured that if you have something like this, it would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals first to get the use approved first. Then it would go to the Planning Commission to get the site plan approved. Y'all are not like that here.
At least for this district, for sure.
For I-3, you are not like that. Instead, you curtail that process, you consolidate, you streamline that process, as Andrew described, by having an extra layer of criteria that an applicant has to meet if you want to implement any of these uses in the zone.
Yeah, such as the minimum lot size, the setbacks, and really, to me, when we've looked at this elsewhere, the biggest concern is decommissioning. If you have a solar farm out there, and Amanda and Jeff and I have talked about this before, and they make money off of it for 30 years, and then that company's gone, you're just left with old solar panels, right? Now, how that plan needs to look exactly, that's going to require a little bit of effort on our part. We're not there yet. We just need a satisfactory plan on how it's going to be decommissioned. And we don't even have an application yet, but we know these are starting to happen across the state. It's better to be prepared than them apply and we're sitting here,
We also know the state of Tennessee is taking a very active role. In my capacity with Dixon County, I have been working with Mayor Ryle with a with the TASER, Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations. I've been taking a very active role in that, and generally speaking, local governments cannot have provisions that are more strict or more restrictive than state law. Because all of this is being formulated with a decommissioning plan, we cannot put in anything more restrictive than what state law already requires in decommissioning plans. Right now, decommissioning plans at the state level are only for a certain wattage. It gets very technical. It's only for a certain wattage and above, which is why it's going to be a little bit tricky, as Andrew was saying, how to finesse these decommissioning plans to be sure that the property is returned to a way that is safe and that allows the property to be used by other owners in the future. Solar ranches are only required to remove the panels. They're not required to remove the infrastructure that supports the panels. So if you're farming, that creates an obvious issue. And I could spend an entire day talking about that, but we're not going to do that today. So just know when you're looking through this language, wherever you see Board of Zoning Appeals in your mind, please replace that with Planning Commission. I will fix that for your voting meeting. So that's in the Article 5 portion.
If I may, before we get off that, and really, I think this is for PC to consider. I know your zoning ordinance says no special exceptions. You could amend that and say, you know what, we want a little bit more latitude. This needs to go to BZA first, then come to us. Or as written, these plans, all of this, the C, D, E, and F subsections, do you want to oversee that? I think I lean toward Planning Commission, but it's up to you on how because you get the first say before it goes up to the council. So, I mean, if you have thoughts right now, please share them. Otherwise, I think it will shift to Planning Commission because that is more streamlined. But part of the reason you have a BZA, three purposes: variances, administrative review of decisions, and then special exceptions. I mean, it's one of its only three mandated purposes.
Very valid
Well,
point.
we don't have any I-3 now though, right?
No. Yeah, so if someone identifies a parcel out there that they want for a solar farm, let's keep it simple, they would have to ask for a rezoning first. Then, if they want to proceed on, they would, if you go the BZA route, they'd have to go to the BZA, get those conditions ironed out, then come to you for a site plan. The way this is going to be structured is rezoning, and then they come to you with a site plan while addressing these concerns in here. Again, it's kind of taking those special exception conditions and the site plan and sticking it together. I can't say which one's better. It's really what is your preference. Right now, again, you have no special exceptions in the I-3. You would have to amend that by adding a line, but you'd have to open the door to special exceptions in I-3. You'll keep that door closed and say, we're going to go ahead and pick what those conditions of use are. You have to have a minimum lot size of 5 acres under this proposal. We have certain setbacks, and then these plans, you've got to show us that we're not going to be left with something that's decrepit on the side of the highway in half a century. So,
Meaning that we want what you're saying, want it all to start with us, and if we say, no, sorry, can't do it, then they can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. No?
right now, the way this is intended, there would be no BZA involved at all.
Right, but what you're saying is to put language in here that we could make exceptions.
Yeah, again, I think any zoning ordinance change starts with this body. If y'all feel like, hey, this needs to be a 3-step process, this is big enough, rezoning first, then go to the BZA and get your special exception conditions. Once the BZA decides that, then bring us a site plan. That would be the 3-step process if you wanted to go that route. Again, here you're combining that second and third step into that second step.
So if the BZA says it's okay and it comes back to us with the site plan, we don't have an avenue to say, sorry, we don't want to.
that's why the zoning part would be more critical there, that's where the discretion is. Now, it's not to say there's no discretion, but, you know, to the satisfaction of the PC, say, if we're keeping it with the PC, shall present a decommissioning plan. Well, to Amanda's point, we'll get into what that means, but they're gonna have to submit something that y'all find acceptable, that's not more restrictive than state law is at the moment. They're gonna have to show you the environmental impacts, and their plan to mitigate it. Permits, that means they have to show us permits. Emergency plan, no, I mean, you're gonna get back into that minimum requirement conversation. If they check all the boxes for a site plan, and these pre-existing conditions, then you would be compelled to approve. The discretions of the rezoning, is that site appropriate for I-3, knowing that any of the uses under I-3 would be permitted, not necessarily, they could say they're coming in for renewable, but as you know, any of the uses permitted by right would be allowed within I-3, subject to the existing condition. So, if you're asking me where is the discretion, it's in the rezoning. So,
Andrew, if someone were to come in for a rezoning application, and the planning commission and the council wanted to know, an applicant says, what is your intent for this property? And they say, we want to establish a solar ranch or an atomic reactor or any of whatever the uses are under an I-3.
great.
Could the council condition the rezoning, you know, that the rezoning to I-3 is conditioned upon the BZA and planning commission approving the use and site plan? Or is it once that it's rezoned,
Well, I mean,
that's it?
as you know, that's practically describing a PUD. This is not a PUD. So, no, I mean, you can put reasonable conditions on I-3, making it conditioned upon the site plan or the special conditions. They're already in there. I mean, that's already, it's already a requirement. They don't need to make that a condition. They could, it'd be superfluous, but it's already there. You have to have a site plan. You have to adhere to the conditions that y'all are putting down. Again, we're starting with a blank slate. If there's any other things that y'all are concerned about, we can certainly explore it. But Amanda's been working on this for both White Bluff and the county, and these are kind of looking to other jurisdictions, the things you want to see with a solar farm or something like that. I did have a question. Would the landscaping ordinance that we have, would that apply to this? Okay, so there's some buffering there and, you know, all of that, so.
And I'll tell you, my experience with this actually started in Robertson County. So this has been, the crafting of this language started almost 2 years ago, in trying to come up with language that is neutral, yet still effective, yet compliant with state law, which is not as easy as one might.
No, I'm okay with the way this is written, I just wanted to be straight in my head with
Yes,
the
of course.
candidates we had.
Yes. And one language doesn't fit all jurisdiction either, so. Okay, so thank you for that, Andrew.
So, what the planning commission has, as it's written, or not even as this is written, but the rezoning step is where there's some leeway here.
Yeah, that's where the discretion is.
So what if someone, so right now, I mean, we're fine because there's no I-3.
There's no I-3.
To do this, you would have to come in and get a rezoning.
And there are no pending and there's no pending applications, don't know anybody coming in with anything.
So somebody comes in with a valid use under current I-3 and we grant them that.
They can do anything that qualifies for I-3.
Correct. But then now you've got a piece of land sitting there at I-3 and then suddenly they're not going to do what they said they were, but then somebody comes in and grabs that parcel.
Right.
Then you don't have that step of rezoning to put those conditions on.
Outside of the conditions you put in the site plan part of the ordinance, which is what you're seeing here. This is presuming it's been zoned I-3. Now, what do we do with the site plan? And that's where the minimum lot size and the plans they have to present come into play. They wouldn't put any of that together at the rezoning. That's
Right,
kind of its
that's
own
right.
entity. But Jeff's right, it's, any of the uses under I-3 would apply.
But we do know that if it was a cheaper parcel, point that I free eligible for, like, for this type of use, because the minimum lot size is 5 acres. So there is some deduction there.
And that may be something for y'all, or maybe kind of give up to the council to consider. Do you have any further input on lot size or setbacks or anything? I mean, that's where you can, because again, those are setting those minimum standards that everyone that, has to apply, and conform to. If you think it should be smaller or bigger, different setbacks, I mean, now's the time to think about, and you're not voting today, so you can think about it before Tuesday, but now's the time to think about what could be there and what would I want those requirements to be. Because a lot of those plans, those are for everybody's protection, but those are going to happen regardless. It's really the other conditions that you're setting as the minimum. So if you put the minimum at 6, you're probably going to get someone eventually, someday, decades down the road even, who's going to come in at 6. If you put it at 7, they're going to come in at 7, Now, larger, if y'all drive down I-40 towards Memphis, you'll see those big old solar farms off the side of the interstate. Those are on big tracts of land.
In Kentucky.
Yep. But this is for the town, and what do you, if there was going to be any type of, as Amanda said earlier, any type of renewable energy system, so whether it's solar, wind, or something we haven't thought of yet that is intended or will be used for electricity generation off of the site, what requirements do you want?
Is there enough room for 5 acres to make that even workable?
I imagine that the facility would be smaller than if it was on a larger piece of land. I mean, there's no, I don't know the economies of scale or what makes it work. We've talked about, on-site wastewater systems before at different levels. Like, do you need a subdivision to be big enough to justify the cost, right? I don't know where that is. If, hey, we need at least 10 acres of a solar farm to make this justifiable. I don't know what that is. You put 5, no one may do 5 because it's too small. And they need a larger tract of land to make something like this work. I mean, someone could put up one windmill, and you don't need a ton of land for that. I mean, there's a fall radius and all that, but
It really depends on the size of your outfit. It just depends on the size of your company.
I guess if I was thinking what Jeff said there, I can just, if somebody comes in and has a specific use, I'm gonna put a solar farm in, and they going through the process of getting to I-3, then whenever it gets done, and it is I-3, and they go belly up, no financing, something like that, and so it's I-3, and they sell it to John Doe, and I was just thinking about that, so that opens it up for everything that's in I-3 for her to go to, so I just wonder if there's some way out of that.
So and I agree with what you're saying. The stopgap, if you will, with I-3, as we've talked about, is that there are specific conditions attached with the uses in I-3 that there are not in other zones. So, for example, the renewable energy facilities, 5 acres. Let's see, I had it up here. There may be other size requirements for other uses in the I-3 that you would not otherwise. Airports, for example, you have to have certain clearances. So there are other
5 acres is going to work for an airport.
right, and there are other, and plus there are other permitting requirements, federal requirements, and things like that. So it's not just a free for all. And I want to be sure that in my own thinking that I want to be sure that I'm clear in that presentation also, that it's not a free-for-all in an I-3. It is constrained. It is constrained in terms in entities higher than the town level. You get your federal permitting and stuff involved too.
I mean, I'm looking at the list, so really, I-3 is the impact facility
Yes.
zoning. I mean, that's what that is, and if you look at that list, there are state and federal regulations with every one of these.
Right.
Airports, heliports, arsenals, atomic, I mean, you're getting into a very, very specific category. Transmission lines, fireworks, storage, manufacturing, incinerators, landfills, I mean, those are highly regulated, highly specific areas. The only other way to address it, and I don't recommend this because you don't need 800 different zoning classifications, but is to make renewable solar I-4 or some other zoning classification at it. That is not really in harmony with what your zoning ordinance is supposed to do. You stick it in the most heavy use, which is our I-3, and you put in the conditions you want to see if that were to come in, which is what the council's, the commission and the council will be looking at right now, is if there's anything else they want to see, any other thing that needs to be addressed in the site plan. I mean, again, now's the time to say it. I think this is well written and is a very good baseline, but it's up to the PC and the council what y'all want to see if any of these renewable energy facilities come into play.
And that is the goal, it's to fill that gap, because there are no conditions associated with it. It's just, at this point in time, it just says, yes, it can go in an I-3.
Yeah, this is already a step up and requiring more.
Yeah, we need something,
Keep that in mind.
something for you all to use.
What you're saying is conceivable that
Oh,
it
yeah.
could take, if they got it zoned I-3, it could take 5 years to get through all the other process before they come here. Getting their federal permits, getting all this agreements and all this stuff in place here.
I don't imagine any of the things that would come into I-3 would be quick.
That's right, that's what I mean, yeah.
I have a question. It doesn't really. Okay, what if someone wants to open a gun range? I know this got nothing to do with renewable energy, but a gun range underground, does that have to be like an I-3?
It's not listed in here.
I've seen I heard you say arsenal, so I was thinking.
That's,
Can we put a pin in that so we can finish this, and then we'll come back, because there are provisions for that, and that can actually give Andrew a chance to poke through that if you don't mind. Okay, so if we're good with the checklist, if we can move on to the second part, which is part 3, which is amendment of the zoning ordinance, Article 3, by adding a new section 3.130, non-industrial renewable energy system. So this would be a new section that addresses the non-industrial renewable energy system. So Part A, purpose. The purpose of this chapter is or section, whichever, is to promote the use of solar energy and to provide for the land planning, installation, and construction of energy systems in White Bluff, subject to reasonable conditions that will protect public health, safety, and welfare. B, applicability. Non-industrial renewable energy systems shall be allowed in any zoning district and may be installed upon receipt of the necessary construction, electrical, and mechanical permits. Now remember, non-industrial is your homes, your commercial, things that are for on-site use. This ordinance applies to energy systems, I don't know why I keep saying solar, energy systems to be installed and constructed for residential or commercial use. And then in bold, other sections of this zoning ordinance govern renewable energy system facilities, which are a lot's primary use. Design and installation. To the extent applicable, the energy system shall comply with the provisions of the International Building Code as adopted by the town of White Bluff. The design of the energy system shall conform to applicable industry standards. Setbacks and height restrictions. Any system, whether ground or roof mounted, shall comply with all accessory setback and maximum height requirements for the zoning district where the system is installed. All exterior electrical and plumbing lines must be buried below the ground surface and placed in a conduit. And that is the end of that. Is that okay, Roy? I kind of went a little bit on your lane there.
yeah,
is that okay?
I said voila, yeah.
Okay. I saw the hands, but I couldn't hear what you
That's
said,
what that-
okay.
that's what that meant.
I was like, no. Okay. So I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Now, do I have anything else on this? Any comments? Questions? Anything else come up?
You need to look at Miss Debbie's Dunridge question. Yes. Andrew, did you find it?
Is it C2?
I think it's in
Okay, I was looking at showing.
It's in the one commercial zone.
There's development standards for
It might
English.
be C1, I think it's C2.
I
That was
think
one,
it's,
okay,
I think it's C2.
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, that's.
That makes sense for commercial, right?
And there are development standards for that in section 4.100, article 4.
I can remember several years ago, we only had one situation where they approached us about that, and when we were looking at that, I think we went to Brentwood to get their language and verbiage and what to do.
It was an indoor shooting range.
Right.
Is what it was.
And at that time, I don't think we had nothing strong enough, nothing on the books, so that's when we went and looked at that. Whoever was the power to be at that time.
I'm not seeing it in the uses permitted for C2. We
What
could,
about exceptions or anything like that? I know it's in one of the commercials, I just can't, it might be C1.
yeah, there are development standards for indoor shooting ranges in Article 4, but that doesn't answer the zoning question. Which, I guess we can talk about that briefly. It has to be housed in a building furnished with electricity, because, that's a nice one. And built of impenetrable walls, floorings, and ceilings. So I guess you get to pick what does that mean.
We were
You're expecting.
We were talking about maybe underground part of it.
I mean, I guess the dirt is going to be impenetrable.
To a certain degree, yes.
And then excluding parking lots, if it abuts a residential zoning district, there shall be a minimum setback of 200 feet from property lines, compliance with all federal, state, local statutes, ordinances, et cetera, and you have to have on-premises documentation of the same. OSHA requirements, and all shootings shall be conducted within a completely enclosed building. So, I mean, that's there in the development standard. I assume, Amanda and Jeff, this would come in as a site plan, and be under these development standards, so.
It's I-1.
Okay.
Oh,
So I was thinking about where they were talking about it. It would have been I-1.
That was right.
Well, I go through all this stuff when they get some meters get broke.
It is not a special exception to I-1, so it's permitted, by right with those development standards. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And the zoning comes in place, getting it rezoned or whatever, if they're going.
if it's already on C2, you could change it to C1?
I-1.
Oh.
Yeah, it's in the same, your animal care and veterinarian services, automobile services and repair, construction, sales and services, transport, warehousing, and indoor ranges and firearms. I mean, this is really, really light manufacturing district with a few other uses thrown in there.
Okay.
As you get, typically, with all of them, you go commercial, residential, or industrialized, that number goes up, the intensity goes up. So obviously, your R1 intensity is a lot less than your R3 intensity. Same thing with I1 versus I3, what we were just talking about.
And then we go into, we have I1 districts, 2 of them here, and then you don't want spot zones, so there's all kinds of things going on out there.
Anyone have anything else? If not, I'll stand adjourned.
Yeah,